Bienvenidos. This is a podcast that explores Latinx media and culture in its many forms. I am Dr. Rojo Robles.
And I am Dr. Rebecca L. Salois. And we are Latinx and Latin American Studies professors at Baruch College in New York City. In this podcast, we will analyze Latinx film, television, literature, art, and cultures.
We will consider how these works are perceived, analyze them, and investigate the real-world reflections and implication of that work on Latinx cultures in the U.S. and beyond.
Welcome to Latinx Visions.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenides.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are joined by our colleague and professor of English, Dr. Jennifer Caroccio-Maldonado. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on the interview as well, but we'll get to that. Just for our audiences, since you are a first-time guest here on the podcast, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to even participate with us on this episode?
Yeah, thank you. And so I came to participate because, I teach in the English department, but I'm also affiliated with BLS. And so it's been a great opportunity to really bridge literary studies and ethnic studies, and particularly my background in researching Latinx graphic memoirs and comic biographies. I thought it was a great chance to kind of lend my expertise in looking at Edel's memoir. And so specifically, I thought a lot of parallels at the personal narrative that are coupled with research and archive and those kind of larger cultural histories that I see in a lot of different Latinx memoirs and biographies that have been published in the last 20 years. And so I'm just really excited to see Worm can kind of continue that tradition.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many great Latinx graphic memoirs out there. And this is just another one we can add to our collection, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In this episode, we're wrapping up our season on Latinx cultural politics with a conversation by an interview with Cuban-American graphic artist Edel Rodriguez.
To start the episode, Rojo will be providing a bit of background on Rodriguez and his career, along with an overview of his graphic memoir, Worm, A Cuban-American Odyssey.
Then we will turn to a presentation made by Rodriguez on March 27, 2025 at Baruch College during the Harman Writers in Residence Spring Semester event. This talk was recorded in front of a live audience and was accompanied by a visual presentation that Rodriguez references multiple times.
We've included a link in the show notes to this presentation so you can follow along if you'd like. We highly recommend doing so as he shares images of his work not only from the book, but from magazine covers, social media, and more. He also shows the audience family photos he was able to recover as part of the research process for writing his memoir.
Next, we include a brief interview with Rodriguez conducted by Jennifer and Rebecca about the process of creating a graphic memoir and the approaches he took to telling his story in a way that was meaningful to him.
In the final segment from March 27th, we have included a selection of audience questions along with Rodriguez's answers that we found insightful. To wrap up the episode, we'll share our reflections on the presentation and interview.
Edel Rodriguez is a Cuban-American visual artist. He was born in Havana, Cuba in 1971 and grew up in a small farm town. In 1980, he and his family left the country during the Mariel boat lift. The family settled in Miami, where Rodriguez was first introduced to American pop culture. Rodriguez attended the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, where he graduated with honors in painting. He then attended Hunter College, where he received a Master of Fine Arts degree in painting in 1998. Rodriguez's art is informed by socialist propaganda, Western advertising, island culture, and city life. He's inspired by personal history, religious rituals, politics, memory, and nostalgia. His art is an examination of identity, mortality, and cultural displacement. He uses a variety of materials and his work ranges from conceptual to landscape. He has received countless commissions over the years to create artwork from different clients, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, The New Yorker, Der Spiegel, Rolling Stone, Fortune, U2, and more. He has exhibited his work in Los Angeles, Toronto, Nueva York, Dallas, Philadelphia, y en España. His artwork appears in the collection of a variety of institutions, including the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. He teaches at the School of Visual Arts in Nueva York and is this semester Harman Writer in Residence here at Baruch College. In addition to his graphic memoir, Warm, Rodriguez has written two children's books, Sergio Makes a Splash and Sergio Saves the Game. He has illustrated a number of other children's books and has designed the covers of books including the 50th anniversary edition of Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe and the 25th anniversary edition of The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros.
Worm, which is the focal point of our interview in this episode, is a graphic memoir about Rodriguez's childhood in Cuba and his move to the United States during the Mariel boat lift. Rodriguez discusses his family's decision to leave and the consequences of that decision. The book tells of his boyhood amidst the Cold War, his family's displacement and exile, and their longing for those left behind.
It recounts a coming-of-age story of an artist and activist who today struggles to differentiate his adopted country from the dictatorship he fled amidst the United States' turn toward extremism. But more than anything, it's a narrative that celebrates immigrants and their role in protecting and invigorating U.S. freedoms.
So basically, I'm doing a little introduction to my work, but also where I'm from. This is where it kind of started. This is my grandfather's farm in Cuba. Very small, very small little place. I would spend most of my weekends here, and then the other time I would be at home in my small town with my other grandfather, who was a carpenter. So at a very young age, I was working with my hands, making things, and being, outside. This is a picture. These pictures are from when I was about 5 years old, when I entered the school system in Cuba. On the right is me with my beret, which is issued to all Cuban children. And then on the left is me in my my uncle's military uniform. And what happens when you're a child in Cuba, as most children are very interested in war, military, things like that. But what happens in Cuba, it gets even more amplified because the government starts giving you the tools, the uniform, the anthems, etc. And I think that has an effect where already at a young age, I wanted to dress in a military uniform. I wanted to be in the army. And that's what they end up making a lot of in Cuba. You have to go into the military when you're, I think it's 15 to 16 years old. This is the ceremony where I'm given my my bandana as part. It's like an induction ceremony. And these are some of the posters that I grew up with around my hometown. These are billboards that are on the highways. I wouldn't call them highways, the roads near my town. So you grow up with slogans like "Homeland or Death," socialism or death, and these kinds of things. I remember when I was a kid trying to figure out what's the obsession with death. And why do we have to kill ourselves to die for our country? This is my family in my grandfather's farm. It's very very small little shed that the whole family grew up in. My mom had 8 sisters, and they all grew up in this house. And this was a typical family party where we'd gather maybe about once a month. Slaughter a pig. Make some Cuban food and basically have a great dance party. This is in 1979, and about a year later, about half the people in this picture were gone. Okay, and now none of these people are in Cuba any longer. Everyone's left. Our chance to leave was the Mariel boat lift. It was an event that happened in 1980 where the Cuban and American governments. This is in the middle of the Cold War. The Cuban and American governments agreed to let people leave Cuba who did not, the Cuban government is the one that agreed for people to leave. They wouldn't do anything to them, and the United States brought them in. Basically, there were many pressures in Cuba against the government, and it was a way for Castro to empty out jails, insane asylums, get rid of any other opposition that was on the island. And my parents weren't really opposition. We just disagreed with the system. But just for disagreeing with the system, they labeled us worms, scum. There are a lot of acts of repudiation against people like my family. And we ended up at a military detention camp after we were taken from our home. We were in this detention camp for about 7 days. And it eventually placed on this boat called Nature Boy, which by the end of it all, there were about 100 people on board that left. That's me in the red jacket over here, and my family on the right. And this is me on the edge of the boat. Now, when you leave an island in the middle of a refugee situation, you don't bring a photographer with you, right? So these are photographs that I've been able to find over many years. The first set of photographs was when I was working at Time Magazine. I met a photographer. They found out that I was Cuban and I had left during the boat lift, so they wanted to do a little publisher's note on me, and they hired a Cuban photographer to take my picture over by the Statue of Liberty to feature me. And this photographer, he was Cuban-American. He had been working here in New York City for a long time. As he's focusing in on me, he looked at me and he says, I've met you before. Where have we met? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe in college. I don't know who you are. And he said, no, I've taken your picture before. And this was 14 years after the boat lift. He says, he asked me, when did you leave? I said, I left on May 1st. He's like, I was on a boat on May 1st. I was covering the story. I have pictures of you. And I thought he was messing with me. And the next day he showed up at my office. He had a little envelope and he's like, look what I got. And I opened the envelope and it was all these pictures that you're seeing of my family that he had taken. His name is Mario Ruiz. And some of them ended up being on the cover of Newsweek and other publications. So that's one thing I try to teach the students here is research, dig deeper, go to the libraries, try to find out what if you're doing a story about someone, what information can you gather on that? If it's about a country, what can you learn? Because my book is a collection of all these things, of all these details, of all this history. And part of the reason I make my work is I want to create my own history. I want to, I'm making all of this political work so that in 20, 30, 40 years, someone looks back and says, who was this guy doing this stuff against Trump? And maybe they'll get inspired to make something against some other vile dictator that's working in 30 years, if we get there. So overnight, I went in Cuba from these kinds of graphics of the revolution, Che Guevara, Castro, icons, to this kinds of graphic in the United States. I became fascinated by rock and roll, heavy metal. It's sort of this heavy clash of cultures that happens. It's kind of hard to explain to someone who hasn't been through it. When you're in a place like Cuba where American music was not allowed, the Beatles were banned, rock and roll was banned, and all of a sudden, basically the next day, you're here, confronted by everything: McDonald's logos, Burger King, Kiss, rock bands, etc. That clash of cultures, I think, has a lot to do with my work, how it evolved, how I started meshing and moshing pieces up from a revolutionary country to a very capitalist country. This is one of the first things that we did. About 6 months after being here, my cousins and I just started playing rock shows at the family parties. So we have a salsa party that we wanted nothing to do with. We're like, we don't want to be here. It's just a bunch of old people dancing. We want to do a rock show. And they would say, okay. And so my family was very encouraging. Yeah, go ahead. We'll stop the salsa music. And then for half an hour, you guys can bang on cardboard, basically. So we get really excited. And for about a month, we painted the kits. The symbols were hubcaps from cars. And then the audience was all these Cuban refugees, And we did this like 6 or 7 different shows: Jay Giles Band, Survivor, and this one was Kiss. And that was one of the first things that I painted, was that box. And then I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. This is some of my work from the first year. This is my studio. Again, painting on boxes. So not much has changed in, I don't know, 40, 50 years. I do all sorts of projects, magazine covers, book covers. A lot of stuff is always happening in my studio. I tend to work in series. So this is a series I was doing just line work with little dots, almost as like stars in the sky. So I maybe land on a drawing like this, and I will do 10, 20 of them. This is another set of drawings. And these are some paintings, collage acrylic paintings. I take all of that stuff that I do in the studio and bring it into my commissioned work. Posters for Broadway, off-Broadway, theaters, operas, film posters. This is a recent film poster that I created for Joel Cohen of the Coen brothers when he did Tragedy of Macbeth. I did a couple of posters for them. Album covers. Here, one of the things I talk about to the students in class is all the places where the work that we make as illustrators ends up. I think sometimes you have to point it out because we're so used to seeing this stuff in culture, but we don't realize there's actually humans making these things. And it's very inspiring to young people to actually see the end result. These are some of the book covers I've created. But the thing that I've become mostly known for have been magazine covers. I've created probably 250 magazine covers since I started working in 1994. These are a few of them. This was a portrait of Mao for China's New Revolution. He was wearing the Louis Vuitton jacket. And it caused a stir with the Chinese government and with Louis Vuitton. Yeah, we got a few calls on that one. Then Osama bin Laden, I did that the day after he was killed. So basically I had about 24 hours to do that one. But the first time I noticed that a cover can be very powerful, a source of conversation, let's say, is when I created this cover for Communication Arts in 2006. They did a whole cover story on Cuban designers. They were including me as the Cuban designer in the United States, and then a whole other set of stories on Cuban designers in Cuba. And I thought that combination was interesting. So I submitted this idea to them, like, why don't you put this on the cover? I came up with this idea. I had been thinking about it for a while, the concept of it. Whenever I went to Cuba, I remember when I would leave the airport, they were like Che Guevara portraits on wallets, which I thought, and on everything, you know. And then in 2000, and I had always been sending medicine and clothes and things like that to family. But around this time, they were not asking for medicine or food. They were asking for brands. They were saying, can you send me some Nike tennis shoes? Can you bring AirPods? And those conversations led me to come up with this image, this idea where brands have their own cachet. That's what it's called, brand cachet. And how Che himself had become a brand by that point. He wasn't really a revolutionary figure anymore. It was just put on ads and things like that. What happened is this image, created a lot of conversation on blogs at the time. It went on for like 3 months. These people like discussing the issue, sometimes fighting. Communists didn't like it. Capitalist people didn't like it either. So I was like, okay, this is a good place to be where everyone dislikes something. Then in 2014, I did this series. I tried to put attention on things as an artist, bring attention to things that people are not talking about. ISIS was taking over in the Middle East, and I didn't feel the news was doing anything. So I created this online campaign about ISIS and the things they were doing. So, and destroying art and many other things. And I started this campaign online, and it became very viral online. So then I switched it to posters, and I started bringing posters around New York City. It creates an issue for me because if I'm putting a poster of this up, the police don't get irony, That's my problem. My consistent problem with everything I do is the cops don't get it necessarily. So I could be, right now with this administration, I could be accused of promoting Hamas because I did an image like this, But whatever. That's the dangers of what I do. Here's some of the campaign on in the streets. This is a magic moment where the guy's just watching his film and not paying attention to what's behind him, which is the point. The point is that we were so consumed with ourselves that we were not watching what was happening in the world. And then in 2016, I realized, okay, the real extremists are not ISIS because they're not in my backyard. The real extremists are these guys with the red hats. So I took many of the images I had done about ISIS and just switched the colors up, added little red hats, and we have the same problem here, extremism in America. 2016, at the same time, this character showed up in the scene. Everyone thought he was funny and hilarious and what a goofball. And I immediately saw something different. I didn't think he was funny. I never watched him on any of the shows. I thought he was kind of a danger to democracy, and I felt like I needed to do something to warn people, but mostly to warn the press, because there's a lot of people in magazines, television that follow my work. So I was trying to influence them to treat this character in a different manner. This wasn't a regular politician running here. This was someone that could become much more dangerous. So I created a character based on 4 colors: the yellow hair, orange skin, red tie, and black suit. And I designed this character no eyes, because I didn't really want you to look at his eyes. Who wants to anyways? I just wanted you to kind of get a sense of what he was doing. I began an online campaign again. So I'm using the internet to influence not just people, students and such, but I'm mostly trying to get at media people so that media would spread these images even further. This is one of the first images that I created and posted. Mostly at that time, I was posting on Twitter and Instagram. These are some other ones. I think the one on this one here, I did it, I think it was like Memorial Day in 2016. And the one on the right, I was just walking around outside a sign, no poop sign, and I saw Trump in there. So I did that. And what happened was the images became so viral on the internet that at some point I got the magic call that I was waiting for, which was the people that I usually work with. I was trying to get them to hire me to put this on the cover of their magazine. I had done about 5 or 6 covers for Time magazine at the time. And I was like, if they're watching what I'm doing, maybe they'll call me one day. And I got a call, and they said, we have a title called Meltdown. It was in the middle of the election in 2016, and Trump had just mocked a dead American soldier and his family. So the editors thought, that's it, he can't survive this. He's got to quit in 2016. I created this image to go along with the headline called Meltdown. It was it made the rounds, let's say, in the press, online. There was a lot of discussion about it. So then 2 months later, when he said he liked to grab women by their private parts, they called again and they wanted a sequel. And I created this one, which is him even more melting, turning into a puddle. And all of these ended up being in the news, shared. It was a big sort of commotion. How could Time magazine do this to such a wonderful man? So I began a street campaign again of posters. Here are some of them. The one on the right over there is at the Trump Hotel in the lobby. And I took it to Times Square. All these people in the suits are from Central America, and they loved them and didn't charge me for the pictures. And then what happened was they were so successful that then this magazine called Der Spiegel in Germany called me for the first time to do a cover. And they literally said, we love what you're doing with Time magazine's covers. We want to do some of that here. And the election was about to happen. We didn't know what the result would be. So the assignment is illustrate a result that you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. So I came up with this idea of this asteroid hurling towards Earth, but you don't know if it's going to hit it or not. And that was the concept, because the cover was going to come out right before the election. And then at the same time, this is after he won. He ended up winning the election. So here he hit the planet. So he wins the election there. And I put this one out because it relates to the book. In November of 2016 is when Fidel Castro died, right? So when Fidel Castro died, I just went in my head, oh my God, okay, he's dead finally, but now I have a new guy to deal with, which is Trump. And this is how my head works. So immediately I just switched the outfit and put the Cuban military hat on Trump. The death of Fidel Castro, the ascendancy of Trump. The other thing that Trump has in common with the Cuban Revolution is that Trump was born on the same day as Che Guevara, which is June 14th. That I found through what? Research. Che Guevara and Trump were born on the same day. So then in 2017, this is after, once he comes into power, the first thing he does is the Muslim ban. I felt it was a very insulting thing to do to immigrants. So I took one of my ISIS images and just replaced Trump's head in the center and then put the Statue of Liberty beheaded. I put this on the internet and it became very viral just on my own feeds. Then what happened was Der Spiegel called me and said, we saw what you put online. We want to put that on our cover. That was the first time that something from my social media ended up on a magazine cover. So that's what I tell students is create your own content and put it out there and have people, pay you for it basically and publish it. You don't wait around for someone to give you assignments. Make your own assignments. So I took it, I revised it a bit, and that ended up being on the cover of Der Spiegel magazine. And this one's probably the most recognized image from this whole series. It ended up on posters. People took it out to protest at the airports. All sorts of things went down with it. Then suddenly the story became, or I became part of the story. So whenever newspapers would call me or the media would call me, it became this storyline of a young immigrant child who grew up to take on the president of the United States. That was the storyline. And a lot of headlines. I went on a lot of TV shows. This went on for about 3 months just because of that one image. I made a lot of friends. I made a lot of friends online. A lot of messages, a lot of love. This is the kind of mail I get. I have a folder on my desktop called Hate Mail, and I put it all in there. And at some point, I thought I would do something with these, and I did. They're in the book. So I wanted to keep a record, and there's a page in there that shows a lot of these messages that I got. But what it does is just makes, when someone threatens me or does like that, the only way I can understand why it doesn't bother me is when you were 8 years old or 9 years old and you were called a worm and a scum and all these things by the Cuban government, it doesn't do anything to me because I've already done, call me anything. It doesn't matter to me. Yeah. So I'm just going to do more stuff to piss you off. Here's another one. Here's another one. Well, I guess you guys got it. Yeah, it's North Korea versus the United States. Then harder things like the one on the left is the headline says the real face of Donald Trump in German. The editor is great. He was really very anti-fascism, and from the very start, every time he published a cover in Der Spiegel, he would write a whole page essay on it. Sometimes they would change the cover because I sent them something. So this one here, I just had the idea. I sent it to him, and he changed the entire focus of that issue, just based on because this one image came in. These are more. The one on the right, the same editor from Der Spiegel wanted to do a story on a book that had just come out, and I sent him a bunch of ideas, and he called me and he's like, "Come on, Edel, you've got better than this." So I said, "Well, there is one that I haven't shown anyone because I think it's too much." And he's like, "Send it over." And it's that one. It's Trump. It's man sort of devolving into Trump, and he's like, "We love it. We're going to print it." Then I made stickers for peaches. A few more. Him in a corner. One thing that happened with some of these, like you see the Time cover, there are no words on it. Okay, I think I've done about 3 covers for Time magazine that have no headline. Now, I used to work there. That's very rare, and editors love writing headlines. So the fact that they just published the image on its own is a big triumph, I think, for me. Once you establish the brand, I think I created a brand basically. You can then kind of destroy it. You can do things, stretch it, move it around, create all sorts of things with the look of this brand. This was a revise of the saying that's on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your I don't know what else. But it's a ice poster. This is for Topic magazine. And then what happened? People would just take all of this. So you become part of the culture, and people began to make their own posters based on my designs. So this is a design. I put it up online, and I also let people know if you want to paint your own version of my poster, or if you want to print it and bring it to a protest, do so for free. You can do whatever you want with my work. So this was one version. These are a bunch of other examples of people making their own work based on my images and bringing them to protests. And this is very exciting for an artist, I think, to see that kind of work. Basically, the agency that does all the work for Nike in Portland gave me the entire first floor gallery to have a show. When you get support like that, it's very, very nice because I think for the most part, when you're risking yourself, you want people to back you up. And White & Kennedy's the agency, and they did this giant show there, and they put it up all themselves. It was about, I think, 60 images by that time. I think now I've probably done about 300 images on this. And one of the things they asked me was, is there anything that you want to do that you haven't done? Anything you've thought of? I'm like, yeah, I want to make a Trump piñata. But I don't have time for that. And I don't know how to make piñatas. So they hired a piñata maker from Guatemala that lives in Portland. And she made this, it's like a 4-foot piñata. And they hung it in the middle of the gallery. And right before they were going to hang it, they asked me, what do you want to fill it with? I'm like, Cheetos. So they went out and bought like 20 bags of Cheetos, all sorts of sizes, and they filled it. And then we had a giant piñata bashing event at the gallery. And then CNN covered it. I don't know how they found out about it, but and that ended up being on CNN. And this is me in the Lower East Side. One night I went out there and started pasting up posters, and a bunch of guys came up to me and started asking me, what am I doing? And I said, I'm just putting up posters. Cool, we're the police. So there were just a bunch of undercover cops trying to stop people from defacing city walls. And I almost got arrested, but I was able to get away unscathed because one of the 4 cops liked my poster. And he said, look, we're going to let you go, but I really want a copy of that one. And the cop wanted to put it up in his precinct in the city. So it just made me go, okay, we're not in the dictatorship yet, if the police are asking for posters. Then January 6th happened, and the New Yorker commissioned me to create a poster. January 6th was basically everything that I had been warning about for 4 years finally happened. I have a feeling that was going to happen, and it did. All of this work is in this book called La Gente Naranja. And then here are some images to show you what happens when you actually go out and speak out. I actually, a lot of people warn me, be careful, people are not going to want to work with you. And instead, I've gotten a lot of work and commissions based on it. This was a whole set of posters that I created for the band U2. This is at Madison Square Garden. They just asked me to do 100 posters on whatever topics I was interested in. And it was a great assignment. I worked on it for about 4 months. It was here in the United States tour and also in the European tour. Subway posters for SVA, and they wanted me to be political on the posters too. So here's the subway posters I created for SVA. And then it gets us to the book, Worm, Cuban-American Odyssey. Starts with the rebels coming into Havana with the Congress behind them in January of 1959. So everything basically that I talked about in the presentation is part of this book, but in a lot of detail. I wanted to get people actual information, facts. I wanted people to understand why immigrants arrive here. We just say 5,000, 10,000 showed up. They're a problem, but we never actually interview people to find out why did they leave their land. Nobody wants to leave their home. Nobody even wants to leave their town or their grandfather or grandmother. So we should have more respect for them. And hopefully this book will make people understand that. And look, then January 6th, there's a bunch of bearded men attacking the Congress in the background. So that's the book, the sort of like the two sides of the book. That starts with the Cuban Revolution and attacking the Capitol, and then it ends with MAGA attacking the Capitol here. And then after January 6th, some of the covers that I created for Trump when he got indicted, when we thought he was going to go to jail. And this is the most recent one of Musk with his toddler boy. And that's it, I think. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Edel, for that conversation. And now we just wanted to do a few questions for our podcast, Latinx Visions. My regular co-host, Rojo, is not here tonight, so Jennifer so kindly stepped in for us. So yeah, let's just get started right in with the questions.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your title, Worm? And as you said before, it was the Spanish word for gusano. And so can you elaborate, particularly since titles are so important, using that for the title of your memoir, specifically pairing it with a drawing of yourself in a Cuban school uniform?
Yeah, I wanted to create a cover that feels almost like a magazine cover, where you look at it and you see this image of this boy where, he's kind of dressed, he's pretty much following the rules, and they still call him a worm, a gusano. So I thought it would be very grabby when you see it at a bookshelf. To me, a cover doesn't, I'm talking to the students now, a cover shouldn't tell the entire story. So it's not about telling the whole story. It's something to get your attention to then pick up the book or the magazine and read the story. I don't really want to explain everything right on the cover, and I felt this would be something that, worm is such a strong word, I felt something that would get people's attention.
Going off of that image of you as a child, considering that you were only 8 or 9 years old at the time you left, to what extent are these memories your own, and to what extent do they come from stories told to you by your parents, your sister, or other friends and family? And maybe a little bit about, what did the research element of this project look like for you, and why was it necessary to engage in research for what is supposed to be a personal narrative?
Well, I had my own memories of what happened and the sort of the moments that I remember, right? But I didn't know a lot about the backdrop, the things that were. What happened with my parents is that they were doing a lot of things to hide things from me and from my sister, because they were afraid that we would tell on them at school, and that's what happens in these situations where you would have kids that just could go to school and say, "Oh, my parents are leaving on the boat lift," and then if it's found out, then they would send bands of people to your house to beat you up, or do things to your property or not let you leave. So that was their main concern, was to not talk about it. And I had to tie in my memories to what actually happened. So that I interviewed my father separately. I interviewed my father first, and then my mom separately. I felt if they were together, they probably wouldn't even talk completely about what actually happened, and my mom would just be correcting him the whole time. So I spoke to them separately. I interviewed my sister and my aunt, who arranged the whole trip, and then my cousins. So it took years of back and forth, traveling to Miami, trying to get information, and then tying that up with by research with news, with the dates that when things actually happened. So, in everyone's minds, this went on for like 10 days in the camp, and we're actually there for 6 days. So there's a lot of trying to get those sort of details. I was fortunate that when we arrived in Miami, my family was around refugees almost every weekend. We were hanging out and telling the stories over and over again, and people kind of they were so shocked by what happened that they repeated the stories to try to find out how it actually happened, why some people were lucky and were able to leave, why some people were not allowed to leave. So all of that whole process plus all the research helped me get to the entire manuscript.
So there's levels of personal research, but also archival research wrapped in there.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your decision-making process? Specifically when you chose to draw a splash page, and for the audience, a splash page is a page where the entire thing is one panel of one image, as opposed to the usually broken up panels. And so for you and in your art making, why are splash pages so important in graphic narratives?
I think it's important to do so for to sort of give a pause, most of all, some space. If you have constant panels, at some point you don't really get to digest what's going on. And I think when you open up and you see a giant splash page, you can really spend time looking at it, looking at the details, and then you do need, actually, I would do a whole book of splash pages, but you do need a lot of pages to kind of make a conversation occur and have it make sense. So there's a lot of back and forth from those, but typically I'll do like 3 or 4 pages of conversation, and I feel like I need a bit of a break from that, and I'll create a larger image or I'll cut something across. I think my background as a designer, I was an art director, designer at Time Magazine for 13 years, helped me a lot with design. I designed the whole book myself. I rarely worked with a designer. I was pretty much just, it's very hard to know what's going to happen in your story if you don't design it yourself. You can't just give that off to other people. So it's all interconnected,
Can you also say what the difference is between designing a cover image, like some of the ones that you've done over the years, versus the one page in the comic, the splash page?
The cover image, you're working with someone else's headline, someone else's story. So doesn't have the same impact as doing something that's your own story. You know what I mean?
I think one of the pages in the memoir that stands out to me as the one, I know you showed it in your slides here, was of the boat itself on the sea. And one of the things I noticed about that, and actually throughout the whole book, was that you really only use 3 colors, right? You use black, red, and green. Even when you were describing turquoise waters, right? There wasn't turquoise in the book.
You caught that?
Can you speak to your choice to keep to these colors?
Discipline. Yeah, I just decided it's going to be that, and that's it. And then, I'd get something like turquoise waters, or like whatever, they'll get it. But there was another time where I when it switches from Cuba to Miami, I was like, I tried red, and it just didn't fit Miami. I'm like, what do I do now? So I went with half red, which is more of a pink, and that was very Miami. So you can kind of tweak things a little bit. But the decision was, I do feel, I look at comics sometimes that have 8, 9 colors, and it's very distracting to me as a reader. So I did want to have color, because it's very important, but I wanted to limit it as much as possible. I think once you get off on a whole tangent of colors, I think you get too caught up in all those details, and you get distracted from the reading of it.
Yeah, I was curious because, the colors that were used, especially with the greens, it was kind of giving the revolutionary
that's
vibes.
definitely like when I'm asked about my color usage, I generally ask myself, what do I need? Like, not what do I want? Just what do I need here? So what I needed here was red for the hat and the bandana, green for the military. Those were 2 very impactful colors, and black just as the drawing color. For the Trump covers, what do I need? Again, what I need, and I brought it down to 4 colors. I feel that, I don't know, limited color to me is a very strong way of communicating. It's very direct. You can read an image in about a second or 2 seconds. And I like that generally, but also I think over time we've come to the point where we're so distracted by imagery that if you can have an image that shows up in a very clean, clear way, I think it's going to have more impact.
Can you tell us a little bit about the hardest panel or page that you drew either emotionally or technically, or both?
You're going to make me cry. It was my grandmother. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's one drawing where, look at that. There it is. Damn.
You open up to that page often.
That one. Where I'm sitting in my grandmother's lap, falling asleep at night. So that was my childhood every day. Every night she would come over and I would fall asleep on the porch. And it was I think one of the hardest things when of us leaving was that I had to leave my grandmother. I could never see her again. I couldn't see my grandfather again. So that, and writing it and drawing, every time I would go write it, I'd start bawling. And I'm like, what? So I'd leave. I'd come back like a month later. I'd try to do it again. I'd start crying again. And I never cry, right, Jen? I don't cry. So that surprised me, and it happened again when I had to draw it, because I called her Mama. So she was like my mom to me. And that is one of the things that, when you see these people going, go home, immigrants. I mean, you don't understand what these people left to be here and the families they left behind and how close that stuff is. And how dare you, insult them in that way. So I wanted to try to get that across.
I think you did.
Yeah.
And I would, I imagine too, like trying to sum up an entire 8 or 9 years relationship with one person in one page is also going to be part of that difficulty. Yeah,
I think one of the things you have to be disciplined about when you're doing a book, any kind of book, old-fashioned book, sorry, a book or a graphic novel, is to not get too sidetracked on something and that takes the reader away from their narrative. If I went off and spent 8 pages on my grandmother or discussed one of my friends for a long time, I think it just takes it away from keeping the story going.
Towards the end of the book, as you mentioned, you draw parallels between the propaganda used by Donald Trump with that of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. So now that he is in power again,
he's dead. Castro died.
That's a good one. I like that. Jennifer's got jokes. But now that Trump is in power again, what, if anything, would you add to these parallels?
To the parallels of?
Between Fidel Castro and Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, I think that it's full on now. It's full on Castro and full on Mao and full on everybody. I remember when we had the film premiere. It was downtown, and it was 8 shorts. It was my short and 7 other artists' shorts, and everything. They were all artists or LGBTQ artists or immigrant artists, and they asked me like, so what do you think's going on? What things happen? And I just told the entire room they're coming for all of us. And before I said, I'm like, is that too much? And it's never too much with this guy. So I said, get ready because they're coming for you. And this was back in November. And then we see it now. They're targeting, they're going after everybody that is in these groups, immigrants, gay, universities. Like the university thing is the scariest thing because that's what dictatorships do. They try to diminish the universities so that you don't have protests, so that you don't have education. And that I think is, you look through history, they go after universities. And right now, today, I just read that they're not going to give international student visas. They're thinking about not giving international visa permits to certain universities. So they're going to pick which universities, the ones that they don't agree with. You do that to a school, like, I don't know, SVA is probably like 80% international students. You destroy the entire university. And that's the plan.
Yeah, have an uneducated populace that doesn't know to what they would want to protest against, perhaps.
It affects things in many ways, and then they'll likely promote the Christian universities or whatever it is, and then all these things that they're doing to students, where they're arresting them in their dorms. It's really disturbing, and I don't think we're outraged enough, and I don't think our representatives or senators are outraged enough. They don't have the guts yet. I don't know what's going on.
And so if we can turn back to teaching now, you're the Harmon writer for residence, or really Harmon artist in residence. And can you tell us a little bit about what you've been covering in this course and any advice you have for students who want to create their own graphic memoir?
Yeah, I think that the first piece of advice is just start doing it. Don't be afraid. I think it can be, just laughing. This is my student. Just start doing it. The first thing is start with the writing, okay? Many of us that draw think we can just draw our way into a comic, a graphic. It doesn't happen that way. It starts with the writing. And for a long time, I was just sketching out ideas and kind of like working around the edges. And at some point I actually have to write a manuscript. So I wrote, 200, 300 page manuscript, like a novel, that I could then splice up, edit, and bring back down to a point where it was maybe 100 pages, and the rest are images. The entire book is 300 pages total, but the images take up a lot of space. But yeah, it is writing. It is not drawing. It's first writing, then a year or two. I spent 2 years drawing it. And the second piece of advice is go to research, go to information. You can make things up, but in general, especially if you're working with personal story or memoir, it is very much based on the pictures that your family has. Interviews are key. Even if it's your memoir, interview your family, because they'll remember something that you did that will spark a memory as well. I mean, I don't know. I have some sort of memory where I'm able to record a lot of things, visually especially. So when I was talking to my mom and interviewing her, I'd say, so how did this such and such a thing happen? And she's like, you were 2. How do you remember that thing? And I was like, no, I remember it. Like I have an image of it. So how did you remember, when the rock fell on that kid's head? I don't know. I think that's part of it, is remembering things. But if you can't remember them, go to information to trigger those memories.
All right, and we do want to be able to open this up to audience questions as well, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before you do, and maybe even where people can find other pieces of your work that you've done?
My work is on Google, Edel Rodriguez. This is how I usually meet people at the airport. Like, what do you do? Google Edel Rodriguez. That's my work, edelrodriguez.com.
So I'm assuming you're not doing Trump anymore.
Oh, every other day I do something.
I'm so sorry. I just wonder, do you have a new image in mind? And I feel like maybe immigrants need a new image, retelling that story in a different way. I'm wondering if you have another iconic kind of image in the works and what that could be.
Right now, I'm just posting images from 2016 to show that I was talking about the thing that he just did now. I did it back then. I'm not. I don't have that sense. When I was doing the work in 2016 through 2020, there was a sense of urgency for me. Oh my God, I got to do this. I got to grab people's attention, right? You're not paying enough attention. So, people paid attention and they still voted for him, right? So what do you do with that? You still went, not you, but a lot of people went out and so, what am I going to, I'm angry at the voters. They voted for him. So I think the hard part is creating imagery or finding some way to kind of put the onus back on the people that put him in power, right? And when you have that, it's not one person; it's a whole country that voted him in. You had people in Dearborn, Michigan, voting for this guy, right? What's the first thing he does? He bans all the students that are Muslim and wants to send them back. So there's something really disturbing happening in certain communities that think something's not going to affect them. That somehow this guy's magical and he's going to help you and abuse other people. And that is a dangerous place to be, where you're okay with other people being deported or other people being abused or losing their rights, as long as it doesn't happen to you. And it happens in the Cuban community down in Miami. And now we found out that they're getting deported too, the recent arrivals from Cuba. They thought they were going to be okay because they're special. It's not going to happen to us. It's going to happen to the Mexicans. And I hear this. You hear these conversations, Latin Americans are just as racist as anybody else. Everybody is racist in one way or another. And they think it's never going to happen to them. And now it's happening pretty much to everybody in one way or another. So,
what do you think is the difference between socialist authoritarianism and right-wing authoritarianism? Or are they pretty much the same?
I think pretty much the same. I think maybe the right wing have Christianity on their side. That's the only thing that there's fake Christianity that they hide behind. But it's a lot of the same. So I'm seeing it now in like the Homeland Security Department, right? In Cuba, everyone wants to impress their higher ups, right? So that they get either promoted or some favors, etc. Here, these guys at the airport, Homeland Security, they're calling out people and they're pulling out people because their bosses want them to, because they want to impress someone. They weren't doing it 6 months ago, right? It's probably the same people working at Homeland Security that from when Biden was there. But someone above them has said, it's okay, you can be really nasty now. And you're going to get promoted for it. So that kind of institutional, taking advantage of a situation is what happens in Cuba as well. So I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff. It's not that different from far left and far right.
I was just wondering, you talked in your opening about making both sides mad, but you also, I know in class you never pressure us to be political in our work. You talked about what you talked about on stage, which is like emphasizing research and interviews. And I wonder what you would say to a student who didn't have the experiences you had, but grew up in America and is maybe more recently political, who wants to do have work that has impact the way your work has impact, especially your editorial work.
Right.
And like how to find like the bravery to put up with like the hate comments that you get and that kind of thing. How to put work out into the world that might not make everybody happy.
Right. What I think and what I tell I have students at SVA where we do political posters, and some of them are from China, and they're always afraid to create anything because they don't want to offend family and what I tell anybody that wants to make anything, make the thing, and that thing is not you, right? So I don't really feel that attached to many artists get very attached to their work. I don't in that way. I make the work, and then this thing is floating around the world. All it does is has my name on it, but that doesn't mean I made it. It's a thing floating around and causing trouble, and so are the magazine covers. But they're doing what they're doing. Get mad at it. Don't get mad at me. I liken it to having 5 children, let's say, and 3 of them are crazy and crashing cars or whatever. You did your job. You had the kid, but you can't be blamed for everything that kid does. Seriously. So that's how I think about it. There's just so much blame you can get for the creator, and if you build a little bit of distance from the object that you made and yourself, you're not gonna feel. You're not. If people don't like it, you're gonna be okay. Because hey, you don't like it. That's your problem. You're not gonna feel that wrath as hard. So I'm more amused when people are really pissed off by ink on a piece of paper, right? I'm just like, this is hilarious. It's just ink on a piece of paper. Why are you so mad? I'm more amused by it, and I think that I hope my students feel the same way. I think some of you are creating really cool stuff in class, and I just like I watch you, I observe you, I let you do what you want to do, and I'm not going to say don't do this, don't do that, change it. No, I'm generally like just watching and trying to understand what your voice and your point of view is and how to make it better. I don't want to tell anyone to make political art. People ask me like, don't you think artists should be making political art? No, artists should be making what they want to make. If you're going to call yourself an artist, make what you want to make that day. Whether it's political, whether it's a poem, whether it's a flower. No one should be telling artists what to do. I want to do this, but that's me. It's not for everybody, but that's where my head is at.
My question is kind of a 2-part question. The first one is, do you think you have already done your greatest work? And the second one is,
no pressure. No pressure. That's my student right there.
Yes.
And then the second one is, what was the expected outcome of it, or what would it be the expected outcome if you think it's yet to come?
What was the expected? I don't think of great works or anything like that. Like Artists are basically like construction workers, I think. You just go to the work, you do the thing, you send it out. Sometimes it hits and it's great, and sometimes it's not, and you're just making and making. That's the way I am. I'm making art, making product, making things, and putting them out and seeing what happens. You can go through, I don't want to look too far back, because then you're like, wow, that sucked. I can't believe they published that. But yeah, I mean, I do live every day like it's last day. Like I don't really plan that much ahead, so it's hard for me to say that I'll be making something better someday. I'm just kind of like just focusing on every day, and I tell everybody to do that, to just really take advantage of your days, because they're limited, and make the most of them.
You've talked about the possibility of political threats to artists, but another threat to artists' livelihoods is the possibility that editors might use generative AI to make covers rather than commissioning original work from artists. Do you ever rant about that you can direct to the student body? As faculty, I'm wondering if we're on the same page there.
Yeah, right from the start, when AI started like 2 years ago, I think it was fall of 2023, I right away actually got in touch with the Society of Illustrators people and said, we gotta put a statement together that we're not gonna allow any AI into any of our exhibitions or competitions. And I had seen something that an AI image had won an award, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So we put out a statement from the Society of Illustrators. I'm totally against artificial anything. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't touch it. Fortunately, no one has told me at any school that I work at that I need to teach it, because I would say no. I want nothing to do with artificial intelligence, anything. Bug off, F you. It's really soulless. It's disgusting. It's so disturbed by it. I don't even want to talk about it.
I know that a lot of your work is based on paralleling Fidel Castro's rule with the current administration and the past administration of Donald Trump. Has there been any other leaders in your lifetime that you feel like has had a similar parallel, or any to the same extent, or at least a similar extent?
To Castro and Trump? Any other leaders?
Yeah.
Possibly the guy that started the genocide in Rwanda or something like that. I don't know. Pinochet was pretty bad, I think. Anyone that just takes advantage of their power, jails people unnecessarily. There's been a lot of leaders like that. I just never thought it would happen in this country, and that's my problem with what's happening. And the slow roll of fascism in this country is very disturbing, and we're right in the middle of it. It's not over. It's happening in this weird way, and it's really odd. I mean, if I were to write anything else, like a follow-up to this, is sort of recording this slow roll of fascism, like the way it's sort of being accepted by society. Like we're all watching a car accident and no one's saying anything, generally. Why aren't people in the streets? Why aren't professors, out there? Why aren't our senators doing or saying anything? The only thing I saw recently this week was, yes, a bunch of senators really attacked on the texting thing. And so do that. But do that every day. Do that all the time. Because if you don't, then it just becomes very normalized. And I am afraid that he will find another way to run in 2020, 28? It's not the first time. It's happened in many other countries. And I mentioned it to my father. My father said, no way, that's crazy. He has to leave. I'm like, Dad, you don't know what's going on? So I think watching it in slow motion is really disturbing to me.
So I was just wondering, like within your circles, kind of like the artist community, I know we've spoken in class about like intimidation tactics used by what you call the men in the red hats. Right. And can you speak about how that sort of changed maybe the conversation in your circles, or like maybe other artists that have sort of, I know you've stood in the face of it and kind of not stopped and said, oh, well, if I'm annoying you, I'll annoy you more. Right. But do you think others have had different reactions to that?
Yeah. I think some people do not want the trouble for various reasons. I think some people don't have they can be sensitive to these things. I'm not. And you don't put up with bullshit. But so a lot of people don't have that. They didn't grow up that way, and they're more sensitive to insults and pain and things like that. And so that's why I don't tell people to make this kind of stuff. If you don't have that, then, and other people do not want their careers affected, right? So they have a good business making art for either commercial art for brands that don't want to be they don't want to lose those people. I'm sure there's people that don't want to work with me. Like Target is not going to want to do something with me, right? And other artists that have those contracts and stuff don't want to lose that, so they don't take the risk. I don't really care. I'd rather make the work that I want to make. So there's a lot of things involved, and I understand if people don't want to do this stuff.
So my question is actually a follow-up to that. You answered the first part in terms of career. How do you feel about your safety? Like we saw what happened with this Palestinian director. He got beat, kidnapped.
Right.
And we see a lot of people getting radicalized. Do you ever feel that kind of fear walking around for yourself?
Only a couple of times, yeah. When the first cover came out, there was a lot going on, and I had a lecture at the Society of Illustrators, and I told them I wanted to have a security guard there, and he was armed and ready, and he had to talk with me before, and in other ways, I mean I've been to Cuba and back 10 times, right? And I'm always making art and criticism of Cuba. So I've been in those situations, and the way I handle it is you just try to. My work is loud. I am not, right? So I'm not going around with a F MAGA sign, and I'm dressed like this. I go in and out. I don't make and when I'm in Cuba, I'm the same thing. I've done photojournalism in Cuba, and I'll do it with my cell phone. And I try not to bring attention to myself. And if it's a problem, I'm just taking some pictures of my family. So if you don't bring a lot of attention to yourself, you can get away with a lot more things. But yeah, I've been disturbed by some of it. And, I have enough of an imagination to understand what could happen, but I try not to, focus too much on it. Yeah.
Okay, Edel, thank you so much. Can we have a huge round of applause for our podcaster?
So Jennifer, Rebecca, sadly I couldn't be there with you. I really was looking forward to engage with Edel Rodriguez, but couldn't this time. But I would like to know your thoughts on the conversation. What things were insightful about the different topics you engaged with Rodriguez, and what are your takeaways from it?
Sure, yeah. So I found it interesting how so many things have changed since the interview. As I was editing it, I'm like, ooh, wow, that was only, a month ago, right? We recorded at the end of March, and we're recording this intro and reflection at the end of April. And it's wild how many things have changed in that 1 month. When someone has the experience of living in an authoritarian regime or is educated on the histories of these regimes, it's hard not to see the parallels. Rodriguez shares some of these thoughts in his book, but there are plenty more that can be seen today. He mentioned at one point that he never imagined it happening here, and I think that that's true for many of us. I think one of the reasons that narratives such as Worm or even the magazine covers that he has designed are so important, right? They continue to bring attention to these parallels and raise conversations about what to do. He doesn't necessarily offer a solution or anything, but his work and the work of many others like him keeps the discussion going.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I found really intriguing about his talk, and it was very much clear it's coming off the heels of the Harmon course, the seminar that he's teaching, is the intentionality and a lot of the decision making that goes into making a graphic memoir. And so when he was talking about things, whether the choice of doing, 3 specific color schemes or his use of splash pages, And I thought it was really great to hear some of the thinking that went behind that. And so one of the things, particularly when he talked about the splash page, is how he was both, as the author and artist, able to kind of control the narrative and slowing down the reading. And so I thought that was really insightful that he was mentioning his reasoning behind that, because I think with the like more traditional like comic book use of splash pages, I think it can be used very differently. And so just from a visual perspective, I thought that was a really great point that he brought up.
Yeah, that idea of slowing down the reader, where you might think the opposite, right? Like you said, with comics, it's like a splash page is often used as like, bam, here's the thing. But for him, it was more like, no, stop, pause, look over this more carefully. Yeah, I also want to address what he mentioned about the research component of his work, as professors here ourselves, right? Worm is a memoir. And and I want to mention too, I'm also teaching an Art of Life Writing Fight seminar this semester, and we required the students to include research in their life writing assignment, and they were like, wait, what? And so this is a perfect example to show them how they can weave the two together, right? Because Worm is a memoir. It's Edel's story. But it's also the story of his family. It's the story of countless other Cubans and even of Americans in the United States. And so to tell this story, he needed to do some research, and he talked about researching the history of the boat lift. He interviewed his family members. He explored archives. He spoke with photographers. And he took from his own memory, of course, but he cross-referenced his recollections of that time. So research looks like so many different things. It's not always or only academic journals, but I think the integrity of his work holds up because he did his research.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially because of the personal aspect of graphic memoirs, a lot of times it's assumed that, oh, they're just talking from, or they're just writing and drawing from personal experience, that there's not that kind of secondary research, both family, so doing oral history, going, interviewing family members, but then going into like newspaper articles or history books to kind of piece together and both not only fact check, but kind of contextualize, because we do get like a history and contextualization of the Castro regime during that time, and also like a lot of information that I didn't even know about, like the Mario boat lift, that like gives us a lot of this information that isn't just learning about his personal story. And one of the things I really love, particularly about Worm and about graphic memoirs more generally, is the fact that they can use these personal stories to tell these like larger histories. And that's like kind of part of my own like research project.
I'm guessing also that it challenges the idea of the practices of institutional archives, because it demands a different relationship to archives and a different engagement with archival practices.
Yeah, I think in terms of like who is a researcher and who goes into the archive. And I think especially for our students being able to take these classes, whether it's in the like Harmon seminar or the Fight seminar, that they can see themselves as both being able to tell their own stories, but also be researchers as well, and to go into the archive. And I think comics, especially comics by immigrants and like Latinx comics, are able to do that, especially for our students, which I think is needed more than ever during this time.
Yeah, and I think that ties back to our theme for this semester. We didn't necessarily ask Edel any explicit questions about cultural politics, but it was very much the underlying message throughout both his presentation, his answers to our questions, and his answers to the audience questions, right? Like, it's inescapable to engage in cultural politics, especially when you're doing a memoir that is based around a particular historical moment, such as the Mariel boat lift. That's a great way to kind of tie up the season on Latinx cultural politics. And the experiences that we've looked at all semester have been very distinct from one another, right? We talked about Puerto Rican visual arts. We talked about Latea and community theater and engagement here in New York. but now this is adding yet another component. And I always find it fascinating when we do a focus, it's Latinx cultural politics, but it was very visual this semester. And for us to do that in a podcast medium always amuses me.
Yeah, I feel like all the 3 episodes have in common the importance of relationships, the importance of building community, the importance of uncovering personal archives and creating new archives that can document the work of historically underrepresented, invisibilized, silenced people.
Yeah, and I think also the fact that we can bring a lot of these artists to campus and have our students not only read their graphic narratives, but then also engage with them, both reading and analyzing them and creating their own. And so I think it's just been a really great opportunity for students in particular to actually be part of that like cultural politics and shaping it and seeing like the methodology and the research behind it. And so I'm just really happy that you're all doing this podcast and that it's continuing, and then also looking at the visuals and the fact that you were able to have Edel and like others on. I think it's just been really great.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you, Jennifer. We hope that you can join us again in the future. Right? It was great to share the space with you. So we look forward to more collaborations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca and Rojo, for having me. It's been a real treat at the end of the semester.
So, amigos, amigues, amigas, thanks for joining us for this episode. And thanks for joining us again, Jennifer. Thank you all for listening. If you have anything to add to the conversation, please reach out to us via social media or email. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Blue Sky at Latinx Visions. Our email address is latinxvisions@gmail.com. And we would love to include your thoughts in a future episode.
Share us with your friends and family. Subscribe and leave a 5-star review to help others find the show. Thanks again for joining us this semester. We hope you enjoyed all the conversations on Latinx cultural politics, and we are looking forward to our next season and hope you are too. Over the summer, stay tuned for student episodes.
Estamos a la escucha.
Dale. Until next time.